A billionaire married a poor single mother, and his family's revenge left them completely homeless. This story is so wild you won't believe what happened to Evan Hayes and Sarah Mendez. It all began on a rainy night in New York, when the heir to a $4.5 billion fortune decided to run from his own life. Evan Hayes cruised through Manhattan in his Bentley, but every skyscraper he passed felt like a reminder of the gilded prison he lived in. He had everything money could buy: luxury cars, private jets, access to the most exclusive clubs on earth. Yet as the rain hammered the windshield, he felt emptier than ever. His family, the Hayes, was a dynasty that built a hotel empire with iron hands and cold hearts. Evan was the chosen heir, trained from the cradle to take control, but every board meeting, every fake handshake, every plastic smile at gala events hollowed him out. He longed for something real, a genuine connection in a world where everyone saw him as a symbol of power, not a person. Across the bridge in Brooklyn, Sarah Mendez was finishing her third shift as a waitress at the Daily Grind. Her uniform was stained with coffee and sweat, but her spirit was intact. She ran through the numbers that haunted her: $1, $200 in overdue rent, Ariana's therapy sessions at $300 a week, and $580 in utilities. Every cent mattered, and Sarah worked without stopping to give her 6-year-old daughter a life with dignity. Ariana was her reason for breathing, a quiet, introspective girl with an extraordinary gift for drawing complex mathematical patterns that impressed grown-ups. Her autism made her unique, and it also meant daily challenges that Sarah met with quiet courage. While she waited for her mom, Ariana sat at the back table, colored pencils spilling across pages that bloomed with perfect geometric shapes. The Daily Grind was more than a job for Sarah. It was a refuge, a place where routine gave her strength and regulars treated her with respect. Fate stepped in when Evan, tired of another dull dinner with executives who could only talk profits and acquisitions, ignored his driver and stepped out of the Bentley in a neighborhood he'd never visited. Fine rain soaked his designer suit as he pushed through the coffee door, the bell chiming softly. The place smelled of fresh coffee and warm bread, a comforting contrast to the ice-cold ballrooms he frequented. He ordered a black coffee, but his attention was stolen by the scene in the corner, a fair-haired little girl curling in on herself and covering her ears while a disheveled brunette held her close, humming a soft melody. Sarah and Ariana. The crash of a dropped tray had triggered a sensory overload, and Sarah moved with a grace that stopped time. Evan was transfixed, not by Sarah's beauty, but by the purity of the love pouring from her every gesture. Before he could think, he walked over and, to everyone's surprise, including his own, began humming the same melody. It was a song his birth mother, a humble woman who died when he was a child, used to sing to calm his own anxiety spirals. The Hayes had erased that part of his story, but the memory had never left his heart. Ariana's eyes met his, and for the first time in weeks, she smiled. It felt like magic, as if the universe whispered that in this simple coffee, two lost souls had found each other. Sarah looked at Evan, wary at first, but something in his eyes, a rare vulnerability for a man like him, made her lower her guard. "You know that song?" she asked, her voice as soft as a lullaby. Evan hesitated, then nodded. "My mother used to sing it to me. I haven't heard it in years." The conversation flowed from there. Evan introduced himself only as Evan, omitting the heavy surname. Sarah shared her life as a single mom, the struggle of raising Ariana alone, her dream of one day opening a small business where she could sell her daughter's drawings. Evan listened, really listened, like no one had in years. He laughed at Sarah's funny stories about grumpy customers and felt moved by her resilience. For the first time in a long time, he felt human. Across town, matriarch Karen Hayes tracked her son's movements through security briefings. Her cold eyes narrowed when she learned he'd visited a Brooklyn coffee. To her, every move Evan made was a chess piece in the fight for the family fortune. She would not tolerate deviations, especially not with a common woman and a child with problems, as she would surely label Ariana. Jeff Hayes, Evan's younger brother, watched with a smirk. He was hungry for any misstep that could help him usurp the heir's place. The seed of revenge had been planted, watered by arrogance and the fear of losing power. Back at the coffee, the night stretched on, and Evan offered to drive Sarah and Ariana home. She declined politely, but he insisted, because of the rain and the late hour. On the way, as Ariana slept in the back seat, Sarah talked about the struggle to secure proper therapies for her daughter and how the system failed her again and again. A sting of guilt caught Evan. His world was endless privilege, while people like Sarah fought for basics. When they reached Sarah's small apartment, modest but filled with love, Evan saw Ariana's drawings taped to the walls and realized this was the real wealth he'd been searching for. He promised to help, not with handouts, but with real opportunities. Sarah, cautious yet hopeful, accepted his offer of friendship. Neither of them knew that a discreet photographer, hired by Karen, had captured every moment of the evening. Images of Evan leaving the coffee with Sarah and Ariana were already ricocheting through encrypted messages among the haze. A storm was gathering, ready to break over their lives with devastating force. Evan had found something precious, but the price would be higher than he could imagine. The Hayes revenge wouldn't be just about wealth or status. It would target everything he now loved, grinding dreams to dust and leaving deep scars. And so, under New York's rainy sky, a story of love and loss began, promising twists that would change the fate of everyone involved forever. The week that followed felt like a dream to Sarah, the kind she never dared to have while working 3 shifts to survive. Evan showed up at the coffee every day with a different excuse. He had to try the new blend. He wanted dessert. He had meetings nearby. They both knew the truth. Those visits were for stolen moments where he helped Ariana with her drawings, or when Sarah shared stories that made him laugh in a way she'd never seen in anyone from his world. Their connection spread like brushfire through dry grass. Evan discovered that Ariana's gift in math was extraordinary. The 6-year-old solved problems that challenged college students. He started bringing architecture books, and the way her eyes lit up as she sketched ornate facades broke his heart. "She needs opportunities, Sarah," he whispered one night as they watched the girl sleep on the couch. "I can give her that." Sarah shook her head, torn. "I don't want charity, Evan. I want Ariana to earn things on merit." So Evan did something that changed everything. He rented a small studio near the coffee and set it up entirely for Ariana. Computers, drafting tables, everything adapted to her sensory needs. "This isn't charity," he told Sarah, eyes bright. "It's an investment. One day she'll be the most famous architect in the world, and I want to say I helped discover her." In that moment, seeing her daughter's overflowing joy, Sarah couldn't hold back her tears. For the first time, someone saw Ariana's potential, not her limitations. But while love bloomed in Brooklyn, the storm gathered in Manhattan. Karen Hayes called an emergency meeting at Hayes Enterprises. The 50th floor boardroom was ice cold, and not just because of the AC. "He's embarrassing us, Mother," Jeff said, sliding a tablet across the table with photos of Evan and Sarah in Brooklyn. The hazed air riding the subway, eating in cheap restaurants, entangled with this poverty. Karen studied the images with a hawk's gaze. She didn't see romance, she saw a threat. She's the daughter of a bricklayer who died on one of our construction sites. Coincidence? Doubtful. Her thin fingers tapped the marble table. She knows who he is. She's clearly after money. Jeff smiled, knowing he'd sown the perfect seed. We need to act before she gets pregnant and tries to bleed us for a fortune in child support. Karen's plan was diabolically simple. First, she cut Evan off from family funds, freezing his personal accounts. Then she sent consultants to Sarah's coffee, men in suits who pestered customers with nosy questions and inspected every inch of the place. Within 3 days, the frightened owner fired Sarah without explanation. Sarah's life collapsed in 72 hours. No job, no paycheck, rent coming due, she faced the hard truth alone. Evan, busy with a crisis that Jeff had manufactured, didn't hear right away. When he did, he went straight to Sarah's apartment and found the scene that shattered him, Ariana crying in her mother's arms, surrounded by moving boxes. "They evicted me," Sarah whispered, tears scoring her cheeks. "Said they got an anonymous tip about unsanitary conditions." Evan needed no explanation. He knew his family's tactics. Something inside him snapped. Years of anger and frustration under Hayes' rules exploded into a decision that shocked even him. He took Sarah and Ariana to the only place he knew they'd be safe, an empty apartment he kept as an investment, far from family eyes. As they packed their modest belongings, Evan did something he hadn't expected of himself. He knelt in front of Sarah, holding her trembling hands. "Marry me," he said, voice rising from the depths of his soul. "Not for money, not for status, but because I love you, and I love this girl as if she were my own." Sarah froze. The world seemed to stop. Ariana, watching with ancient eyes, walked over and placed her small hand on his. "I want you to be my dad," she said simply. That tipped the scale. 2 days later, in a small garden ceremony at the apartment, with only 2 witnesses, the elderly neighbor and the building's security guard, Evan and Sarah married. 15 minutes of pure happiness, a stolen moment that seemed to promise a bright future. But Jeff had placed a tracker on Evan's car. As the newlyweds hugged Ariana, celebrating their new beginning, Karen's phone buzzed with a message that made her lips curl into a cruel smile. He married her. Time for Plan B. Plan B was simple, brutal, effective. That same night, as the new family slept in their temporary refuge, masked men broke in. They didn't take jewelry or cash, they took something far more valuable. Ariana's computers, her drawings, her projects, everything was destroyed before the terrified child's eyes. A souvenir from the Hayes family, one of them whispered before vanishing into the night. When the police arrived, they didn't believe Evan's claim that his family was behind it. "Evidence, Mr. Hayes," the officer said, skeptical. "We need evidence." The worst was yet to come. By morning, Evan discovered all his accounts were frozen, his name removed from company projects, even his corporate card canceled. The message was clear: abandon Sarah and Ariana, or be utterly destroyed. The block ends with Evan standing on the balcony, looking out over the city that had always been his but now felt hostile. Sarah comes up behind him and wraps him in an embrace. "What if we give up?" she asks, voice trembling. Evan turns, eyes blazing with a sacred fury. "No," he says, holding her face. "This is war now. And I'll show my family they made a mistake, underestimating a man who finally found something worth fighting for." As the sun rose over New York, lighting the skyscrapers his family built, Evan Hayes made a silent promise. He would go to war for the ones he loved, no matter the cost. What he didn't know was that the Hayes had one more card to play, one tied to secrets from Sarah's past that even she didn't know. The safe apartment wasn't safe anymore. The break-in had carved deep marks into Ariana. The girl who once drew compulsively now spent hours curled in the corner of the couch, staring at blank walls. Her notebooks were shredded, pencils snapped, computers reduced to useless parts. Evan saw the pain in her eyes and felt a fire burn through him. Morning brought the first legal assault. A courier delivered a thick folder to their door. Divorce papers, prepared by the Hayes lawyers. The terms were humiliating. Sarah would receive a one-time payment of $50,000, crumbs to the Hayes, a fortune to her, if she disappeared forever and renounced all rights to Evan. If she refused, they'd press charges for harassment, alienation, even fraud. Sarah read with trembling hands. "They think they can buy everything," she whispered, tears staining the expensive paper. Evan took the documents and tore them in half. "They don't understand," he said, steady. "You're not negotiable." Reality, however, was merciless. With no access to his money, Evan sold his Patek Philippe watch for a fraction of its value to pay the month's rent. For the first time in his life, he understood the real value of money, not the millions he'd inherit, but the few thousand that meant a roof over his chosen family. Then Jeff made his cruelest move. He showed up at the apartment in a suit that cost more than the annual rent. "Brother," he said with a fake smile, "I come as a friend. Mother is willing to forget this if you come home." Alone. Evan refused, but Jeff had a card to play. "I did a little digging on your beloved wife." He slid a document across the table. Ariana's birth certificate, with the father's line blank. "Looks like sweet Sarah forgot to mention a few things." The revelation hit Sarah like a punch. She had never hidden that Ariana was the child of a brief relationship with a foreign exchange student who left the country without knowing she was pregnant. In Jeff's hands, the story turned poisonous and manipulative. The next day, things got worse. Social services showed up at the apartment. An anonymous tip claimed Sarah was an unfit mother, neglecting her daughter's special needs. Traumatized by the break-in, Ariana had a meltdown during the visit, confirming, in the social worker's eyes, that there were problems. Evan fought like a lion. He called old contacts, tried to leverage his influence, but every door slammed shut. The Hayes spread the word, helping Evan Med declaring war on the empire. The final straw came with an eviction notice. The landlord, pressured by powerful interests, canceled the lease. They had 48 hours to leave. The moving scene was heartbreaking. Sarah packed their few possessions into cardboard boxes, Ariana clutching the only stuffed bear saved from the wreckage, Evan carrying furniture like an ordinary man, something he'd never done in his privileged life. The night they became homeless was the longest of their lives. A cheap hotel declined his card, the same card that once opened the best hotels in the world. The city shelter was full. They ended up on a park bench, wrapped in thin blankets, Ariana shivering between them. There, under the stars that witnessed their fall, Evan broke. The man who'd faced down CEOs and closed billion-dollar deals cried like a child, his silent sobs swallowed by the city noise. "I destroyed you," he whispered. "I dragged you to rock bottom with me." But Sarah, summoning a strength that surprised even herself, lifted her face to the haze towers in the distance. "No," she said, voice fierce with resolve. "They knocked us down and forgot one thing. When you have nothing left to lose, you become dangerous." Then Ariana, who had been watching quietly, did something extraordinary. She picked up a stick and began to draw in the damp earth. Not her usual complex patterns, but a simple, brilliant design, a modular shelter, cheap, easy to assemble, with clever solutions to the problems she herself was living. Evan looked at the drawing and something clicked. "What if," he said, eyes regaining their lost light, "we don't fight them by their rules? What if we make our own game?" The twist came from the unlikeliest place. The elderly neighbor who'd witnessed their wedding, Mrs. Gable, appeared with a bag of food and a crucial tip. "I heard them talking," she whispered. "Hayes Enterprises is about to land a government deal, a public bid for affordable housing. And you," she pointed to Ariana's sketch, "you have the solution they're desperate for." The plan came into focus in Evan's mind, crystal clear. They would submit a proposal for the bid, not as Hayes Enterprises, but as a new company. They'd use Ariana's design, Sarah's lived experience with poverty, and Evan's inside knowledge of how the family operated. Time, though, was brutal. The bid closed in 72 hours, and they were homeless, broke, with no office. Worse, Karen learned of their plan through a mole in the government department. The public library door groaned as they stepped in, the sound echoing in the hush. While Evan, Sarah, and Ariana settled at the farthest table, spreading the first drafts of Ariana's revolutionary design, across the city Jeff watched every move through security cameras he'd secretly installed. His cruel smile glowed in the monitor's light. "Poor fools," he muttered, fingers drumming on polished wood. "They think they can beat Hayes Enterprises with drawings in the dirt? Tomorrow I'll bury them." His hand clenched into a fist while, on the other side of the lens, Ariana lifted her eyes from her calculations as if she could feel the weight of that hostile gaze. What Jeff didn't know was that Ariana, in her watchful silence, had noticed something that would change everything, a pattern in the bid documents no one else had seen. A loophole. An opening. And in that moment, while the Hayes family prepared their final blow, a 6-year-old began to weave the net that would bring an empire down. The first rays of sun slipped through the library's tall windows, washing over Ariana asleep atop a pile of sketches. Evan and Sarah had been awake for 18 straight hours, faces carved by exhaustion, eyes burning with resolve. Then the girl jolted up, grabbed a pen, and started writing furiously on the back of an abandoned flyer. "See," she whispered, showing Evan a sequence of calculations that defied conventional logic. "The bid notice has a pattern." They had the answer in the question. Her small fingers pointed to clauses in the government document that Jeff, arrogantly, had assumed were safe left online. Meanwhile, at Hayes Enterprises, Karen was celebrating too soon. "In 48 hours this family shame will be over," she told the shareholders, pouring champagne into crystal flutes. Jeff, however, felt a chill. The cameras showed Ariana not as a frightened child but as a tiny genius decoding what his own engineers couldn't. the first strike came through the system. Using public computers and the discreet help of Mrs. Gable, who turned out to be a retired programmer, Evan and Sarah submitted a proposal that not only met the bid's requirements but exceeded them by 200%. Ariana's modular housing design for low-income families was so revolutionary it made the Hayes billion-dollar plan obsolete. The pivot arrived when a government evaluator, stunned by the math behind Ariana's figures, made an anonymous call to Evan. "Who's the architect behind this?" the voice asked. Evan looked at his stepdaughter, quietly drawing, and said, "Someone who understands home because she knows what it is to have none." Jeff's fury went nuclear. He stormed the library with security, determined to destroy the plans. "Brother, this is over," he growled, grabbing pages. He hadn't counted on Ariana's cunning. She had created an ingenious backup. Every drawing was encoded into the geometric patterns she had scrawled in the margins of math books. While Jeff shredded the obvious sheets, the masterpiece hid in plain sight. The battle peaked at a community center in Brooklyn, where residents, many of them Sarah's former customers, gathered to support the family. For the first time, Evan didn't speak as a billionaire heir but as a man fighting for his family. His words, raw and true, filled the crowded hall. But the most powerful moment came when Ariana, pushing through fear, climbed the makeshift stage and unveiled her final design, not just houses, but an entire community, crafted with a deeply human understanding of what it means to belong. The crowd wept. Government evaluators, present incognito, exchanged looks of disbelief. As hope rekindled in Brooklyn, Karen Hayes received the news she dreaded. The bid was about to be won by the homeless, as she called them. Her 80-year empire was being challenged by a 6-year-old child. Jeff pressed the phone to his ear, fingers trembling. "Activate Protocol Phoenix," he ordered, voice a taut wire. On the other end, a frosty reply, "Confirmed. In 24 hours, nothing of them will remain." He hung up, his face a mask of dark triumph, unaware that a few blocks away Ariana was studying a series of hand-scribbled numbers in the corner of her notebook, a pattern only she could decipher, holding the seed of a twist capable of dismantling every piece of the Hayes empire. Rain began to fall over New York as Protocol Phoenix went live, as if the sky were weeping in advance for what was coming. In the back rooms of the public library, while Evan and Sarah organized the final calculations, Ariana stood motionless before a wall plastered with pages of number sequences. Her eyes tracked the patterns with almost supernatural intensity. "They'll hit where we least expect," the girl murmured, circling seemingly random numbers. "Not our ideas, our memories." Meanwhile, in an underground control room at Hayes Enterprises, Jeff watched monitors showing specialists digitally invading every corner of the family's life. His face twisted in confusion when he saw Ariana, through a public security camera, look straight into the lens as if she could see him. "Impossible," he muttered, tugging his expensive suit with nervous fingers. At the small temporary apartment Mrs. Gable had found for them, Evan uncovered the first piece of the puzzle. Checking emails on a public computer, he found a coded message only he would understand, a reference to the song his birth mother used to sing. "They're hacking the patent system," he warned Sarah. "They want to file our design in their name before the deadline." But Ariana shook her head, eyes grave. "Not just that, Dad. They're going to erase Mom's past." She showed them a pattern she'd identified, tiny inconsistencies in digital records indicating an operation to discredit Sarah, making her ineligible for any government contract. The race against time became a two-front war. As Evan used his corporate know-how to build legal barricades, Sarah and Ariana launched their boldest counter. The girl revealed that during their nights at the library, she had not only developed the housing project but built an algorithm that predicted Hayes Enterprises' moves with 94% accuracy. "Andy Gable," Ariana said to the elder, "I need you to take me where they keep the old servers." The woman, who revealed she'd been an IT engineer before retiring, didn't question her. While Jeff focused on the digital attack, he had forgotten the physical archives, old backup tapes holding proof of every illegal operation the company had run. The tensest scene unfolded when Jeff, realizing he was under counterattack, sent men to intercept them. In an abandoned garage, while Mrs. Gable and Ariana retrieved the tapes, Evan and Sarah faced the hired muscle. Not with violence, but with what Jeff never understood: unity. Evan used his knowledge of corporate security to block exits, while Sarah used her waitress instincts to create precise distractions. When the police arrived, alerted by neighbors, they found not criminals, but hard proof of corporate crimes dating back decades. Watching from his office, Jeff saw his world crumble as the monitors flickered and died one by one. But victory exacted a price. Amid the chaos, Ariana disappeared for critical minutes. When they found her, she sat in the back seat of Mrs. Gable's car, sketching furiously. "There's still one piece missing," she insisted, showing a diagram linking Protocol Phoenix to a Cayman Islands account. "Money that should have helped kids like me." As night fell, the family gathered in the tiny apartment, backup tapes spread across the table like war trophies. For the first time, Evan didn't see this as a battle for revenge, but as a mission to return his daughter the future that had been stolen. Across town, Karen received the news of Protocol Phoenix's failure with eerie calm. She set down the phone, opened a secret drawer, and pulled out a yellowed envelope. Inside, photographs of a young Sarah with her father, the bricklayer who died in an accident that had never been an accident. "All right, my son," she whispered to Jeff's photo. "Your mother still has a card to play." Meanwhile, Ariana woke in the middle of the night, eyes fixed on the dark window. She rose quietly and began drawing on the misted glass, not numbers or plans, but the face of an elderly woman she had never seen, yet recognized in her bones. The grandmother she never knew. The last secret Hayes Enterprises had buried. Dawn rolled in with a dense fog that wrapped Manhattan like a veil. While Evan and Sarah slept entwined in Mrs. Gable's apartment, exhausted from the day's fight, Ariana stayed awake, tracing the face she'd drawn on the window. The image of the old woman seemed to pulse on the fogged glass, a ghost insisting on being seen. At the Hayes mansion, Karen didn't sleep. She sat in her study holding the faded photograph of a younger self in the arms of a man Sarah would recognize as her father. Tears she would never shed in public now spotted the old paper. Protocol Phoenix had failed, but she held a truth that could destroy everything, or perhaps redeem something. At first light, Karen did something that shocked even her security team. Dressed simply, without her usual jewels, she drove herself to Brooklyn. Her black Bentley looked like a spaceship on the quiet, working-class streets. The doorbell rang at 6:17 a.m. When Sarah opened it, still drowsy, her face froze at the sight of Karen Hayes in the hallway, a woman once merciless now wearing a startling vulnerability. "May I come in?" Karen asked, voice stripped of authority. What followed shattered and rebuilt lives. Karen told a story reaching back 30 years, when she was simply Karen Mendez, a young Portuguese immigrant who fell in love with a bricklayer named Miguel. The forbidden marriage, the pregnancy, and the terrible choice her own father forced on her, abandon her husband and newborn daughter to save the family company from bankruptcy, or see everyone plunged into poverty. Your father. Miguel, he refused the money I offered, Karen said, hands trembling around a cup of tea. He said he'd rather die than sell you. The construction accident, she admitted, hadn't been an accident. Sarah listened in stunned silence, every word piercing layers of lies that had shaped her life. The anonymous social worker visits during her childhood, the inexplicable scholarships, the opportunities that appeared at critical moments, all the work of Karen, watching from afar the daughter she never had the courage to acknowledge. In the next room, Ariana peered through the cracked door, her wise eyes understanding more than any adult there. She stepped forward and placed her hand on Karen's. You smelled like expensive perfume when you hugged me at the orphanage, the girl said softly. I remember. The revelation detonated in the room. Karen, breaking completely, confessed that she had visited Ariana when the girl was 3, after Sarah temporarily lost custody during a health crisis. It was Karen who quietly pulled strings to return Ariana to her mother. The resolution began when Evan arrived with documents from the recovered archives, proof that Karen had tried to shield Sarah from the worst of the haze, secretly sabotaging Jeff's cruelest schemes for years. Why now? Sarah asked, her voice a braid of anger and understanding. Because Ariana showed me something I'd forgotten, Karen answered, looking at her granddaughter with reverence. Courage. The first shaft of morning light crossed the kitchen window, bathing the 3 women in gold. Karen still held Sarah's hands, tears drying in the creases of a life shaped by wrong choices. Ariana watched her grandmother with a serenity beyond her years, as if she had always known this moment would come. Outside, in a car across the street, Jeff lowered his binoculars. His fingers trembled seeing his mother, the woman who taught him feelings were weakness, embraced the daughter-in-law she had sworn to destroy. Karen's face, lit by the morning glow, carried a peace he'd never seen on her. Something in him came undone as he watched Ariana curl into her grandmother's lap, closing a circle broken for decades. He dropped the binoculars onto the passenger seat. He scanned the simple Brooklyn facades he'd always despised, and for the first time saw not poverty, but humanity. Protocol Phoenix, his ultimate weapon, now felt hollow, as empty as his privileged life. A bitter smile tugged at his lips as he started the car and pulled away, leaving 3 generations of women wrapped in the light of a new beginning. Jeff's engine purred as he drifted through Brooklyn's still sleeping streets. His eyes, once arrogant, now reflected the confusion of a man who'd chased ghosts his whole life. He stopped in an empty square, hands shaking on the wheel, and watched the sunrise wash the sky in orange and rose. In his pocket, the phone buzzed without mercy, bored allies demanding to know if Protocol Phoenix had been executed. Jeff ignored the calls. For the first time, something inside him refused to obey. Back in Mrs. Gable's cozy kitchen, tea cooled in forgotten cups. Karen kept her fingers laced with Sarah's, as if afraid her daughter would vanish again if she let go. Did Miguel give you my name? Sarah asked, voice soft and full of contained emotion. Karen shook her head, a shadow crossing her face. No. He swore I would never know. A social worker, she told me when you turned 18. Her words broke. I paid her to keep me informed, but I never had the courage to come close. Ariana, silent, rose and brought one of her drawings, a house with 3 generations of women on the porch under a starry sky. She set it in front of Karen. "You were always here," she said simply, pointing to a small figure sketched at the back, watching from a distance. Sarah wiped away a tear and looked at her mother. "What about Jeff? Does he know?" Karen closed her eyes, as if bearing a weight decades old. "Jeff always knew I had a life before I married his father. But he believed I'd fled an abusive husband, not a daughter." She took a breath. "He used it as a weapon against me for years, said I was cold because I didn't know how to love." By late morning, Evan entered the kitchen with documents recovered from the servers. His eyes met Sarah's, and without a word he grasped the magnitude of what was happening. He sat beside her, his quiet presence a harbor in the storm. "We need to talk about the bid," Evan said gently. "The deadline is in 6 hours." Karen lifted her head, a flicker of the old determination returning. "Leave that to me. Hayes Enterprises will withdraw our proposal." Sarah stared, surprised. "Why?" "Because I finally understand that inheritance isn't about empires or fortunes," Karen said, her gaze soft on Ariana. "It's about making sure my granddaughter has the future I denied my daughter." Outside, Jeff watched through a half-open window. He saw his mother take a phone and start giving orders, not with her former chill, but with a new conviction. He saw Evan slip an arm around Sarah, and Ariana smile as she showed another drawing to her grandmother. Then Jeff did something that would change his place in the family forever. Instead of heading to the office to orchestrate his next strike, he walked into an electronics shop, bought a burner phone, and sent an anonymous text to Evan, "Watch the board. They won't accept Karen's surrender." The message arrived just as Evan opened his laptop to submit the final proposal. His eyes found Jeff's outside, and for the first time, instead of hatred, he saw something that looked like a plea for truce. Morning sun flooded the convention center where the bid would be decided. Evan, Sarah, and Karen arrived together, the united front no one, least of all the Hayes board, expected to see. In the corridors, whispers spread like fire. Is the matriarch with them? As they prepared in the waiting room, Jeff stepped into the doorway, pale but resolute. "The board didn't accept Mother's surrender," he warned, voice low. "They submitted a fake proposal in your name, riddled with planted errors to discredit you for good." Karen lifted her head, eyes sparking with her old ferocity, now focused on protecting her family. "I'll handle it," she said, reaching for her phone. But Jeff stopped her. "No, Mother. This time, I will." What unfolded in the bid hall was pure corporate theater. The Hayes board, men and women Karen had commanded for decades, gaped as Jeff, the loyal heir, took the podium and publicly exposed the fake proposal scheme. "For years, I was complicit," he confessed, his words ringing through the stunned silence. "But today I choose my family, all of it." Watching on a backstage screen with Mrs. Gable, Ariana spotted a crucial flaw. The Hayes proposal's calculations contained a fundamental error that would compromise structural safety. Using her grandmother's tablet, she recomputed everything and sent it to Evan. When Evan presented the corrected numbers to the evaluation panel, the Hayes proposal collapsed. The final blow came from Karen. She publicly disinherited Jeff and named Evan and Sarah as her sole heirs, with Ariana as future chair. Silence fell, then thunderous applause, as the committee president announced, The winning proposal is the Hayes-Mendez Foundation. The name, chosen by Ariana in one of her drawings, hung in the air like a banner of reconciliation. Sarah's hand trembled in Evan's as they looked at Karen, whose eyes shone with held-back tears. It was no longer Hayes Enterprises but something new rising from the ashes, a foundation blending Evan's corporate knowledge, Sarah's social vision, and Ariana's brilliant innovation. Backstage, Jeff watched with a calm expression, understanding this wasn't the end of an empire but the beginning of a far greater legacy. 6 months later, in the same coffee where it all began, the Daily Grind, now renovated and expanded, the family celebrated the opening of the first affordable housing project born from Ariana's designs. Brooklyn residents, many of them Sarah's old customers, filled the place, faces lit with hope. Jeff, now volunteering as a consultant for the foundation, served tables alongside Sarah, his smile genuine for the first time. Karen, in a simple dress instead of expensive suits, hugged Ariana. At dusk, Evan and Sarah climbed to the roof of the building that had once been their temporary refuge. From up there, they watched the city lights flicker on, not as an empire to conquer, but as a home to share. "Do you miss it?" Sarah asked, fingers intertwined with his. He looked at the horizon, then at the woman beside him. "I miss nothing," he said, drawing her into a hug. "Because I finally found everything." As they headed downstairs to rejoin the family, Ariana waited on the steps with a new drawing, not of houses or numbers, but of 6 people holding hands under the stars: Evan, Sarah, Ariana, Karen, Jeff, and Mrs. Gable. A family not by blood, but by choice. The true Hayes legacy wouldn't be measured in billions, but in lives transformed, starting with their own.